Today we're going to be modeling, unwrapping, and texturing this little mushroom guy. So he kind of doubles up as a character and potentially environmental art. If you took away his little face, the little antennas and little arms and legs, he'd just be a little mushroom. So kind of getting 2-in-1 out of this, but we're going to use really simple shapes. And his little arms are just going to be, and his feet I guess too, are just going to be little tiny extrusions. It won't be anything too complicated. We're probably going to do the antennas as separate pieces as well. So to get started with this, first thing I'm going to do is go ahead, go to our front view, and just drag in this reference image. And this is just so you guys can see what he's looking like, and turn off the camera and the light so I don't have to deal with seeing those guys. And again, my recording, I can only use one monitor. Normally I'd have this guy's reference over on a different monitor, but again, having it just in the 3D viewport is going to work out just fine. And again, this concept art, I just picked it up from DeviantArt. So this user right here, Zelda994612 at deviantart.com. There's just a random thing I stumbled across, and it looked like it'd be pretty easy to model. So let's get started on this guy. So the first thing before I drop anything down is I want to get like a rough target poly count. I definitely want to stay under like 1,000 or so, so we're going to just guess he's going to be at about 500. That could change, but again, if let's say my target was 500, now is at 700, and these edge loops coming around here, I had them set to like 20. If I knock that down to like 16, it'd probably reduce my count enough and the shape would be the same. So real quick, I'm just going to start with, actually you know what, I'm going to start with a sphere, but instead of a globe, I'm going to use a quad ball. And over here, this polygon type, I'm going to have this set to face instead of subdivisions. So with all my settings good, I'm just going to right click. Subdivision level's at 0, so it comes in as a cube. So pop it up to 1, 2, and we'll do one more. Put it at 3. So looking at this from the top, this is how round he's going to be. And already we're at 200 tries for just this sphere. So throw the body in there and we're probably looking at about 500 or so. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at this guy and say this area right here is going to be the top of this sphere, so this part of it. So really we don't need the bottom. From the bottom down, we'll just go ahead and model that. So we'll just go ahead and select the bottom, and again middle mouse drag to do the lasso that selects all the way through, and then delete that. So after we delete this bottom half, I'm going to go ahead and look at this top half. I could move this image in and line it up, but I'm just going to go ahead and eyeball it. So right now, if we look at this shape right here, this is his side view. This guy is going to be opened up a little bit more than we have here. This is a little bit too vertical for what I want, so I'm going to take this edge and just scale it up. I'm also going to move this one down, scale it up just a little bit. And then looking at it from here, you really can't tell because I can't see from the top down if this is perfectly round from the top up. Just to give it a little character, I'm just going to go ahead and taper in the inside a little bit because I don't want to have anything, a perfect circle or a perfect straight edge or anything like that. I want to keep it a little bit more organic. I'm going to double click this edge, Z key or edge extend, pull that down, scale it out. I'm slowly just going to repeat that process until I build up this shape. So the other thing you might notice is I'm getting, sometimes these edges are hard, sometimes they're soft, depending on how much I scale this. So around here it's soft, and then it goes up hard. And this, both edges are hard. And again, I've said this a few times, but to get to this, we have to throw a material in here, because it starts with this base material. So let's name this Mushroom. Now when we click on the material here, we'll go down to the smoothing angle, and again, if you have a low resolution, you might have to hit this More button to find out where it's at. It's right here, and we'll just bump this up to 180. Now everything will be smooth all the way across. The other thing is just looking at this from the front, we're getting this little point right here, because you can see there's an edge here and an edge here, so I'm probably going to address that real quick, just to make the top of his head a little bit more soft. So this, we're just going to go ahead and add edge. Just kind of scale this guy in a little bit. And then, real quick, I'm going to go to my sculpting tools. Use this move brush. Now I'm going to turn symmetry on the X on. And then, if I left click and drag left and right, it'll make my brush size bigger or smaller. And then if I right click and drag left and right, if I left click, I can just manipulate these verts around, and again, whatever is going to happen on the left side is going to happen on the right side. I'm just going to manipulate these points. They match a little bit better. And again, this isn't 100% needed. You guys probably don't need to throw this edge loop in there if you don't want to. But I just figured I'd show you one more tool and technique you can add to your bag of tricks to make this stuff a little bit easier. I'll just start migrating some of these points up a little bit. I could have easily just grabbed these scale tools, or using the scale tool, done pretty much the same process. But again, having a couple different ways to do stuff usually helps out. And the other thing is I really haven't done anything to the back, so it's technically should be roughly the same on the front as it is on the back. So I had symmetry on the left and the right side. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the top view and just delete this back half. And then I'm going to use the mirror tools to send the front half to the back half. But before I do that, I just want to make sure that all my vertices here are right on this 0 line, so I don't want to actually grab these and move them manually. What I can do is I'll move these all over the place just so you can see an exaggerated, better version of it. So I'm going to grab all these verts that I want on the 0 line, switch to the scale tool, and then scale in all the way on the z-axis. But we say we have negative scale turned to on, so I can either turn negative scale off and rescale this in, or just go to here and hit scale 0%. And now they're aligned going this way, so I know that they're all in a straight line, but I'm not entirely sure if they're lined up perfectly with the z-axis. So what I'm going to do is under here, center selected, click on Z. Now I know it snaps right into place. I'm going to double click these guys so I have all of them selected. Go to my duplicate tab, hit mirror, change it to the z-axis because that's where I want to send it to. Hit apply. Now I have the front and the back are the exact same. Go ahead and turn the grid off. Actually, I'll turn the grid back on just for a second. We'll actually take him, get the colored version, and put him right on the grid. Now I'm going to go ahead, turn symmetry off, scale him up, because I want him standing right on this 0 plane. So most games, any characters or items, you'd want those at 0, 0, 0, 0 in the world center, and you'd want them sitting right on where the ground plane is. So it looks like my head's a little bit too big, so I'll just scale it down. And again, this is a perspective because he's kind of looking down, which will do that. But I just want to get him kind of in place beforehand. And then go ahead and turn off these sculpting tools. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and look at this. I'm going to change from our shading from default to solid. Now I can kind of like focus on the silhouette of what's happening. So again, I'm getting right here at least a kind of harsh angle. So I'm going to do is go ahead and grab these little verts, move them in just a little bit just to soften that up. I'll go from solid and go back to default so I can have some shading in here. Now I can continue with this shape. So right now I just did a scale and an edge extrude, but when I went to scale it, symmetry's on, so you see my widgets over here. So if I try to scale this in, you'll see that these points will scale in, but the center ones will stay right in the middle. I actually want to keep this round, so I'm going to turn symmetry on the X off and then scale this in. I'm going to bring this up because I'm going to have this indent a little bit. Scale it in one more time, and this edge right here is going to be where I want his neck to be. I don't want it to be too small. I can always adjust later. Then we're just going to pull it up just a little bit more so it's a little softer. And the one thing, again, this is personal preference, I don't like this sharp highlight going on. So in your material here, you have this Fresnel amount. You can drop this down to a lower amount. So 20 gives you a little bit of a backlight. I usually just drop down to 0 though because I really don't need that. I just personally find it distracting. But from here we're going to do another edge extend. And then this is going to be the main shape of his body here. So we can actually just pull this, for right now at least, all the way down to almost where the bottom of him is going to be. Go ahead and select two edges, do a loop slice. From here I can go ahead and scale this up. Throw a few more edges in here. And this I'm just trying to get a pretty good feeling of where the volume's at. And again, looking from the top and the bottom, we don't have a perfect circle anymore because we scaled it in a little bit. Add one more edge. And I'm going to grab this, pull it over here now, and just see how we're lining up with shapes. So again, I'll just line his body up. The head, again, is going to be rotated, so give it a little rotation down from the side, somewhere in there, but I'll leave that for last, or one of the later things at least. Now I can go to here. If I don't want to give it a new material, I can just go to wireframe. And it makes it a little hard to see the edges because if we have white edges on a white background, makes it a little bit hard to see. So I'll go to this backdrop, change this transparency to about 50%. Let's just a little more. There we go. Go ahead and grab all these edges, and now I'm just going to line this up to where the body's at. And this one will actually pull down to where the bottom of his hand is, or his arm. And then I'll just know that that edge is where the bottom of him is, and this one is going to be where his, kind of where his top arm starts. I can go ahead and put another edge loop in here, pull that out to round it out. I'm going to call that good for the shape on him. and we'll go back to our default. Now with down here, I could just do another edge extend and do a join average, but I really don't want all these coming to one point on the bottom. It wouldn't be a huge deal if it was, but I want it to be more like how the top is. So I'll actually just grab this, look at it real quick, see how many edges around we have. Since it's extruded down, chances are it'll meet up perfect. But again, 16 edges, go down here, double click, 16 edges, how convenient. So I'm just going to take this and either do a copy paste, or under this duplicate tab I can do the clone. Right click, have one clone, bring that up so I can select it. Now I'm just going to rotate it 180 degrees so I can either manually put in 180 over here, or if you hold the control key and right click, you can get snap values. So it makes it so I can snap this at little 15-degree increments. So we'll get that to 180. Slide it down. And scale it in. Pull it up. So now this is going to be a little bit too rounded. So we're just going to scale it down to kind of subdue how round it is. Scale it up so it matches the hole a little better. Actually scale it down just a little bit. Now I'm just going to go through here and I'm just going to do join average. So it's under vertex. Join average is command right here. I'm just going to do this command over and over again, so 2 vertices joined. I don't want to see this anymore because the message always comes up, so I'm going to do this a bunch. So let's do hide message, hit OK. Select those two, join this guy and this guy, join. Probably should have turned symmetry on, that would have been the smart thing to do, because it would have saved me 8 join average commands. But it's okay, doesn't take that long to do this all the way around. And the navigation practice is usually pretty good. One thing you want to make sure that you don't select through, so from here if I selected, I might accidentally get this vertex over here. So we have 1, 2, and 3. Only want this one and this one. Just got to be careful of that. Oops. Just like that, I selected through an accident. And join average. So we're just going to select these and scale up a little bit. Oops. Just move them around just a little bit so we get a better shape. There we go. So count-wise, we're at 544. So we'll go over a little bit. I could reduce it. So again, we have 16 polygons going around. So if I changed it to 14, let's say. Now we have 14 edges around. Now we're at 468. But again, I just said ballpark 500, so going over is not a big deal. So all we need to do is add the arms and the legs, and then the antenna. So we'll go ahead and add the antenna real quick. So this, instead of making a new shape, actually, you know what, I will make a new shape, because why not? I'll show you guys a new tool. So cylinder, right click, we definitely don't want it this big. So segments here, let's do 4, see how that is. That'll probably work. And here we'll just do 4 around, so it'll just be a little square, but again it's at a 45-degree angle, which will work out perfect. So we're just going to scale this down, position it roughly into place. Saying just so we're not doing as much guess and check, let's just slide him over. Now I'm going to scale it in on just these axes so I can get the thickness going. Scale it up so I get roughly the length that I want. Maybe a little bit more. Ding, ding, ding. So now I need to add the little extrusion so it's a little bit wider here. So to do that, turn off this backdrop image, and just select these guys, do a polygon extrude, switch to the scales tool and scale it up. So on the bottom, I can pull this up so it's more of a rounded shape. But on the top, I could either have this be a full polygon like this, or again, if we look at our polygon count down here, just because this antenna is going to be really tiny, so it won't be super noticeable. We're at 596. If I grab this top polygon, do a join average, now we're at 590, so from back here it looks roughly the same, and we saved 5 triangles. And again, that'll be a total of 10 triangles when we take the other antenna into consideration. So something like that. Turn this guy back on. Now what I'm going to use is the bend tool. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to get this tapered shape to where it goes kind of in and then out, and then in and then out. So we're going to pinch it here and probably have just a little placeholder there, and maybe have it taper out here, so we might need one more edge in here. Let's use this one. Scale in a little bit, and bring that up. Scale out. This guy will just move up. Scale in. And let's actually add one more loop in there. So let's do the slice tool, slice across with snapping on, and again snapping's right here. The hotkey for it's X if you were curious. And then I'll grab this little loop, pull that in, pull it down. And since I made this as a new shape, it doesn't have the material applied, so if I double click, hit M, have the default material that it was, change it to mushroom, hit OK. Now it's got the soft edges we had before. Now what I'm going to want to do is bend this so it has this little arc to it. So in the Deform tab, there's right here Bend. How this works is you left click to turn on the tool. Now you have all these settings. Usually you can ignore these for how this tool works. What I'm going to do is with it active, I hover over here, and right at the base of the antenna, I'm going to go ahead and right click. What that's going to do is it's going to bring up this little interface, and this is the little widget for how the bend tool works. So this little dot, you'll see there's this line coming from it. So this is the end, this little line is where it connects, and this is going to be bending from. So if I move this little dot all the way up to this top, and I go to here and it's at the base, it's going to bend from the base. So this top portion is going to bend, all these are going to bend, and what I really don't want is this top portion to bend. I want to keep that as straight as it was, so I just hit the undo key real quick. Now I'm just going to take this little handle and bring it down to under here, so now anything after this, so anything going up in this direction after this line isn't going to get bent. So this part right here won't turn into like a macaroni shape, it'll keep its straight edge. I'll undo real quick. So something like this, and we'll call that good. Now we just have to plunk this little antenna into place. We'll go ahead and grab a reference art and move it over. Now looking at from the side, you see that they kind of bend forward a little bit too, so they bend out and forward. So my first bend, I was in the front view. This bend, I'll go ahead and be in the left view, and just to be sure, we'll go to the front view, select some polygons on his face, go to the side. I know this is his face, so I want this one to bend forward. So again, activate that bend tool, right click at the base, move this target point down to under the little cap, and bend forward. So we're good here, so we can either hit the escape key or the space bar to drop the tool. The one thing you want to be careful with is you really don't want to usually don't want to use the bend tool in the perspective mode, because right now I'm hitting it at an angle. So if I was to grab, oh, where you at? The bend tool and right click, I can see more what's going on, and I can grab this little blue guy in the center to move it around. The only thing is I'm moving on multiple axes. So if I go over here, it's sometimes harder to adjust to get it right perfectly into place. And especially with this guy, if you're moving it on two different axes. I have it over here in space. Now I try to get it to line up, and it just takes a while. But when you're dealing with a front view, right view, side view, whatever, anything but a perspective 3D view, you're going to have an easier time dealing with bending stuff. So from here, I'm going to hide this. And this little bottom polygon I really don't need, because it's going to be mashed inside of his head all the time, so I can just delete that. And again, that saves 2 more tries. And then when I send it over here, those same 2 tries won't be there. So, where are we at? Duplicate, mirror. We're going to do on the x-axis this time. Hit apply. Now it sends the antenna over. So now we have right and left antennas. Now looking at the arms real quick, they don't have them right in the middle, it's slightly to the right. If you like, kind of bisected this guy from the half, but we'll be fine with grabbing his from the side here. But what we're going to do is, looking at this, you can see how wide this polygon is, and these ones are a little bit more narrow. So what I really want to do is bring these edges over this way more, but instead of just moving them, what I'm going to do is grab these 2 edges, do a loop slice, and I only want to do a slice selected. So again, I only had these 3 edges selected. Loop slice, slice selected. Now when I slide this edge across the surface, it keeps its shape. So I'll slide this one in. We'll say loop slice slider, send it into 30%. Do the same one here, loop slice, and it remembers that 30%, so I don't need to do it again. And what this is I'm just narrowing this arm up so his arm's not as thick. Actually, I'm going to do that and bring it in a little bit more, but we're going to do one more thing. We're going to turn symmetry on the X. So now we'll be doing both of his arms, the left arm and the right arm, at the same time. So again, do this loop slice slider. Let's do position 40% should work. And this one, since I did it in the wrong order, I went bottom to top on this one, top to bottom on this one. It's in more this way, so I can do the reciprocal of that. So instead of 40%, do 60%. And now this is going to be his arm. So to clean this up, we have n-gons here. So what I'm going to do is this one's going to come to a point. So here and here. Make sure these say 0 and 100%, so I know they're snapping. And this one here, just temporarily connect right there, and then we'll get rid of this edge. So now we have quads all here, and then these triangles here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to grab this edge, or these faces, do an extrude, and pull these out. And then I can use these edges to make his shoulder. I could technically just do a join average on these, but I'm actually going to use that extra geometry that was there to, in a sense, give him a little shoulder. So again, we're going to use our sculpting tools and use the move brush. Again, we still have symmetry on. So now I'm just going to round this out. Pull this one up, kind of pull this in, just kind of manipulate this a little bit just to give him a little bit of a shoulder. So again, it doesn't add a ton to what we're doing, but sometimes, especially on really simple characters like this, little subtle things like this can really help sometimes. Go ahead and bring this in, and then bring this over up. There we go, now we got little arms going on. Actually, thin these out just a little bit. So again, nothing complicated at all. Now we just need to do the little feet real quick. And these are, actually we're going to add one more edge loop in here. So we'll move this one up. Now we'll add another one down here, move this one down, and then probably just get rid of this edge loop here. And the reason behind this was I wanted something more along the lines of this for where his leg is going to start. The one thing that happened is you'll notice I'm selecting the polygon on the right and the corresponding one on the left is selecting, but right here it's not selecting this polygon. And what that's telling me is these polygons are symmetrical, but these four are not. So what I'm going to do is, usually when you work symmetrically you do this a handful of times, is I'll actually turn symmetry off, delete his left side. This is the same thing that we did with the top of the head. Scale this into 0%. Now we're going to do a center on the x-axis because we're centering it on left and right. Now under the duplicate tab we have mirror on the x-axis, hit apply. Now we turn symmetry on the x back on. These guys are now selecting correctly, so I know that it's now symmetrical. Because when you're bouncing with turning symmetry on and off, sometimes you forget to turn it back on, and you can have a mesh that's not symmetrical. So for this little leg, let's grab our concept art, kind of pull him over. Arms are lining up pretty good. Let's pull it out a little bit more. So the legs are going to be happening right on these two polygons. So I'll actually grab these ones as well, do an extrude, pull it down. Now instead of doing a join average right away, I'm going to scale this in. And now these polygons I'm going to round out, because just because this is a square right now, I could still think of it as a six-sided cylinder. And with that, we would just make a more rounded hexagon shape. I'm sorry, an octagon, jeez. So now these points right here, pulled in a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just pull these out, just kind of massage these into place a little bit better. Oops. Now this will be the tip of the foot. Actually, go to the front and I'll rotate this down a little bit. Now I'll pull this down, hit join average. Now I'll scale this in just a little bit. Now for the length of the foot, almost had it. Let's do something like that. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and get the tilt of the head going. So from here I'm going to want to rotate it, but I want to rotate it from the bottom. If I rotate it from here, it's going to move his neck back and forth. So again, we really don't need symmetry on for this. but with our move tool, or our rotate tool, anywhere that I right click will move where I'm rotating from. So if I rotated from up here, it would rotate from this point. If I move to the front of his face, it would rotate from there. So I'm going to move it to the base of his neck, right here. And now this would be like him looking up and down. So tilt his head down just a little bit. Pull our concept art back up. And from here, just using the bend tool, we could actually bend his body a little bit to make him looking down or up. So we'll actually go ahead and, I don't even bother undoing it. I'm actually gonna kind of, oops, there we go. Base it more on this and have him kind of looking up with his body bent back. I'm gonna go back to the right view, select his head, right click, tilt his body up just a little bit, and I'll go ahead and select everything. Go to our Deform tab, and there we go, bend. Now we want to bend from his feet, because we want to have his whole body kind of bending up. So we'll do this, and actually I can dynamically pull this down, and this has his body bend more. So make his head bend a little bit less. Do one more bend. This one more focused on like where his spine would be. And then just because he is going to be looking up, I'm going to add one more edge loop. Just to make this a little bit softer. So from here, I'm actually going to grab the head one more time. Actually, we'll probably call it good from here. We'll do a little bit more maybe with the pose in a bit. So now what we're going to do is unwrap this guy. So really we're just going to think of how do we want to split this off. Do we want to cut his head off, have his whole body be one piece, have his arms be different pieces? And then these antennas, those will have to be separate pieces because they're floating separately. So go ahead and hide these tools. We don't need the reference art anymore. Go to this UV edit window. Actually, just to be safe, I'm going to save my file real quick. So mushroom, throw it on the desktop. Maybe that was Dropbox. Doesn't matter. It was saved regardless. So again, with unwrapping, we're going to have this big, this out of the way. This big group of stuff over here, and this is his entire self. And just to make sure, I'll do a quick project from view, right click. This is everything. We'll just move him over here because we want to keep unfinished stuff outside a one-to-one space, finished stuff inside a one-to-one space. So we have these two antennae. So we'll do hide unselected, just Shift H, and then do Shift A, that zooms in, or under view you can do fit selected. So now I select these bottom edges, and then we'll just do probably, oops, this outside edge, and let's turn symmetry on real quick so we only have to select this once. Select on both sides. We'll just select this edge all the way up. So you can either do it manually one at a time, or you can just hit 2 in a row and then hit the up arrow. But now unwrapping this, we'll hit the unwrap tool, activates it, right click in the menu, see what it turns up with. This is our result. And just to make sure that this is good, we're going to go ahead in this material and throw this checker pattern. And again, the checker pattern goes above the material, but below / inside the folder that it's in. Now we can look at how this unwrapped. And again, we're not going to call this good because these checkers are really huge and these ones are really tiny. So we know that the ratio of that's just not going to work out. We want all these little squares to be as uniform as possible. So again, to get that selection back, we're going to do quick select UV border, the unwrap tool. Now you can change these guys around, but it's really not going to change much. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to grab this edge loop right here. So hold shift, middle click. So now we're going to have the top of the antenna and the bottom of the antenna, right click. Now we have something like this. So I'm happy with how these turned out, but these guys are a little bit oblong and weird. So I'll go ahead, hide these because I'm okay with them. I'll do select UV border on these guys. Change these around. It's really not going to be that big of a difference. There we go, that one's a little bit better. But again, looking at the checker pattern over here, we have pretty good squares all the way around. There's a little bit of stretching up here. So what we could do if we wanted to is grab this one more edge, hit unwrap, and now it gives us this little double peak, which will be fine. So we'll call that good. So unhiding everything, we have the bottom and top of the antenna. Might as well show you guys one more thing. What I'm going to do is reattach these pieces together, because sometimes it's easier to unwrap stuff in a couple pieces and then reattach them than it is to just try to unwrap something in one fell swoop. So again, we have these pieces, and I'll go over here so I'm zoomed in on the right one. So ideally we want the checkers here and here to be roughly the same size, and again these are going to be a little distorted because we have a trapezoid shaped here and a square over here, but we can more focus on these and these. So we want this one to be a little bit smaller, or larger, I'm sorry. So we scale that down. Do the same thing with this one. And now if I select these edges, as I select here, you'll see this one's yellow, or orange color, and this one's blue. So the blue one corresponds to the orange one. So when I select this one, the blue one appears, and the blue one appears. That's why I know that those two edges kind of go together. Because if I select it, actually I'll go over to this one. If I select this edge here, you'll see it selects this edge. But this one isn't really selected in the UV space, but it is over here. So if I select the edge over here, see it, both of these turn up orange. So that means that they're sharing an edge. So what I can do is I can sew these together. Just move this down. Select all these edges. And now we have move and sew. So we have selected. What that'll do is move the one that's selected to the unselected one. And then we have unselected. And then there's averaged. So we'll just do select the top half, do selected, and it snaps right into place. Now we have these antennae as one piece. Scale them down a little bit and just throw them in here. Now we have the main body that we have to deal with. So we do quick view, hide unselected, which hides those antennae. Now we're actually going to cut the head off to be a separate piece. So we'll just go ahead and make this, actually I'll just grab one, grab the other, and select all the way around. Oops. And now I can unwrap this, and what it's going to do is it's not going to give me a good unwrap, but over here it's going to throw it into two islands. So we have the body island, or the head island, which again the unwrap on it's horrible, but and then we have the body island. The reason I did that is now I have an easy way to just grab the body or just grab the head. So we'll do just the head for now. And if I double click this, actually let's do the one on the side, instead of having the seam go right across his face. We could do something like this, or we could even figure out a good bottom edge, something like that. Unwrap, right click. Now we have the top of his head here and the bottom here. This isn't looking that bad. Only one thing to take into consideration is look how big those checkers are. They're huge compared to these ones, which are small. So one thing we could try to do would be to do a relax. So that's over here. UV relax, left click, and then in the 3D viewport right click, and then, sorry, let's start over. So left click to turn on the tool, and then in the UV window, left click and drag to the right, and you'll see these iterations right here going up. And as I drag left and right, it'll kind of relax or unrelax those. So you can see over here the checker pattern actively switching. So again, it's still giving me kind of a weird result. So now this is just where you have to make a decision. Do I want, and I'll just duplicate this so I have a second one. Oops. Duplicate it, move it up because symmetry apparently is still on. The side edge, hit unwrap, and grab this portion of the head. There we go. So, do I want a more uniform checker scenario all the way around, or do I want a scenario where there's more distortion? So this one, the bottom one, which is, we'll do the select UV border. So I just cut the bottom here, and then the top here, so we're only going to get a seam right here where it transitions from the top of his head to the bottom. But this one, we have the seam that goes all the way across this head. So potentially if I was painting in 2D and there was like his cheek was here, it would be annoying to go from one to the other. So we'll try one more method, because honestly I prefer this one right now, but trying another one real quick. I'm going to do kind of a hybrid between the two, and hide this so we're not going to unwrap both of those. Oops, need to grab this inside. Had that red show up, and that just means that it wants me to cut there as well. Unwrap, right click. So now we have a scenario like this. So this is going to give us the least amount of distortion, but it has an extra seam. This one, distortion's worse, but the seam's not as bad. So what I'm going to do is just grab just this top portion, do a slightly modified version of this. So if I grab, let's say these polygons, and I scale this, if you look at just this checkers in this 3D viewport, if I scale this up quite a bit, you'll see these checkers get smaller. So I can scale this selection up, grab this next ring, scale him up. I'm kind of just manipulating the unwrap in this way. So I'm kind of controlling where I want the distortion. And I can look at it over here at the same time. So again, it's going to be a little more compressed right here, but this is a transitional area and it's all really going to be one color. So I'm going to call this good. So we have the head here. Now we have the body to do still. So this, let's just cut him in half both ways and see what that results in. We get something like this, and we'll just call that good. Because distortion-wise, it's not going to be that bad. Again, this area is going to be a little compressed. The tummy is going to be a little bit inflated just because of the nature of the shape. But we'll call this good for an unwrap. So now I'm going to do a pack, and this will pack it so it'll move all the pieces around to where they kind of fit well. Stretch is going to make it to where all the checker pieces should be the same size, and orient is just going to rotate stuff so it's a little bit better. So again, just to kind of amplify this, put these guys at weird angles and have them all different sizes. So ideally, all the checkers, instead of them some being big and some being small, they shall be roughly the same size. Pack, okay. Now you see they're all roughly the same size and they're packed in here. But now I'm just going to manually go in and change up where these are just a little bit. So these antennae, I'll actually just move these out of the way for right now because they're usually the smallest pieces you want to pack last because those can really fit anywhere. So this piece isn't fitting up here, so I'll try to grab this piece, flip it on its side, and see if we can't get it up in here. So looking at this, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that the distance between one extreme, so this is the farthest down edge, is one big checker away from the border, and the same thing will be one big checker away from another area. And that's just to prevent bleeding, to where if his head was, let's say this cap, his head was red and his body was blue, I wouldn't get any red bleeding over here. And again, that's called pixel padding. So look at this, pull him down a little bit, look at it over here. In this shape, got lucky, it just barely fits in there. So seeing we have some unused space. So let's just see if we can't pack this a little bit better. And again, this is just something you just gotta explore with. Pull 1 pixel away from each. Maybe we can get these. Yeah, that'll work better. I just wanted these body ones to be upright, which, again, it's not a big deal if this stuff doesn't fit in here perfect, because ideally we want the least amount of negative space that we can have. But again, with not a lot of pieces to work with, this guy might not fit in here all that well. Nope. So with how this stuff, it's not fitting in here super well. So I'm actually going to break this off to where these pieces are two separate pieces, which will create a same seam, but again, this is on the bottom of his head, so you're really not going to see that very much. But seams aren't really that big of a deal. So what I did is I'm going to hit this little tear off button, so I have these selected, so when I bring him over, it's just going to break that into two pieces. So now, I can rotate this, have it right up against this flat edge, rotate this, have it against this flat edge. We can just bring that in, bring this guy in. Now these guys can be upright. And now what I'm going to do is pull this down and to the left as far as I can, so it's one away. Do the same thing with this, move this guy left until it's about one checker away, down until it's about one checker away. These guys, I can go ahead, move them left. And you can see what I'm getting at here is now I have a bunch of negative space here, a bunch of negative space here. So what I'm going to do is select everything, hit the scale tool, and now I could, in a sense, move it up here and scale it. But since I moved everything to the left and down as far as I could, now I can hit the scale tool and zoom in right here and put it at this 0 point. So now it'll scale up or down from this point. So I can just scale it up just a little bit until the first point reaches the edge, which is going to be this point right here. So again, using our scale tool, zoom in and put our widget right here, scale up, and we just got an extra about 5% of use space. I can bring that over. Now I can just kind of massage this stuff around to where I pretty much just try to pull it away to where everything's evenly gapped, because I don't want to have something that's like way over here and crowded, so there's a bunch of negative space here. I might as well just use up all the space. And now padding wise, instead of there being 2 checkers between here and here, now there's about 2.5. Same thing with here. Move this guy up. Now these little antennae, I can just place them wherever I want, just where I see some big open areas. And this will be good for this guy's unwrap. And then from here we can move on to texturing. So before we start painting, what we're going to do is go in, and we don't need this checker image anymore. So we're going to delete that. So to delete him, there's this images tab up here, which if you're on the modeling tab, it'll be in the same location here. Sometimes it can be called, on a different tab, it might be called clips instead of images. But regardless, they do the same thing. Like right here it says add clip, and then now it says clips instead of images. That just depends on if you're on the UV tab or not, but clips and images is interchangeable. But to get rid of this, we're just going to right click on it and hit delete, and that doesn't delete it from our computer, it just deletes it from having that connection with the Moto file. And then here in the mushroom, now this thing, instead of saying checkered, now it says none because it doesn't have that connection anymore, so it's kind of an empty image. We can just right click on this and hit delete. And then when we want to start coloring on this, we have to have our texture selected down here, so our UV show up over here. Then we can go to this paint tab, and then over here, it might default to these sculpting tools, but we have the paint tools right down here. And the main one we're going to do is this airbrush tool. And there's also fill, line, clone is like the clone stamp in Photoshop, eraser, a whole bunch of stuff. The smudge and blur ones work pretty well too. But real quick, just to get this started, I'm going to switch to the airbrush and go back to this images or clips tab. And right now it has this image right here, which is, if you look at it, it's our reference image, the reference art. So if we don't have an image selected, our airbrush tool, we can change the size of it by right-clicking and dragging left and right, and you can see the brush dynamically changing, kind of like it would in Photoshop. But as soon as I left-click on the mesh, you'll see over here it just generated a new image called diff color _1. And you can see, if I drag this out, this little location is users, my name for my computer, desktop, diffuse, or diff color _1.tga. So if I go to my desktop and look right here is where it got created. So now if I do any changes to this and I save it, it'll update on this image. So this image is separate from the 3D file. So we have the mushroom 3D file here, the color file here. These are 2 separate files. So when you guys turn in your stuff, what you're going to do is save out your FBX or OBJ file, not the LXO or LXF file, and then this file could be Targa, JPEG, PNG, just any type of image file. But now you see that this, after this got created, we still have our airbrush selected. If I do a stroke, it'll actually paint on there, and you see I have symmetry on the X on. So if I turn that off, now it'll only paint on one side. But again, painting in here is, in a sense, it's kind of like painting in Photoshop, but you're painting on a 3D object. So if I go from the middle of him and go all the way out to the edge, after a while it just stops, and you can see that it fades. But if I get a bigger brush and I just color and go to the edge, and I just keep coloring the edge here, it stops because it can only see so far, and it won't paint on the back. So real quick we can get our reference image up. And this guy, we can turn this transparency, we'll still leave it on a little bit. So we'll set it to like 20, so it's still a little bit transparent, but not all the way. Move it over. And we'll click on our airbrush tool again. Actually, I just clicked on it to deselect. I'm actually going to switch to our fill tool. Now I'm just going to try to find this brown color. So go over here, get a little bit more red in there, a little bit more saturated, and a little more yellow, somewhere around there. Click to fill, and now we have this solid color in here. And the one thing that's going to be weird that I get a lot of complaints about is people say that my color down here doesn't look the same as it does up here. And that's because in a 3D viewport, go ahead and switch to the solid mode real quick. Like this, there's no lighting whatsoever. The object is just filled in with the solid gray color. So you can't really tell, because there's no surface, what the shape of this is like. So is it round, is it flat? From this you can't really tell. So again, if we go back to default, it's going to have the color that we added, but it's also going to have the shading. So down here you can see it's a little bit darker, up here is lighter. And again, if you didn't change any of the settings for the Fresnel or the specular or whatever, it'll have the highlight around the side. So a different thing you can do is go in here and change it to the shaded texture, which this one's going to be a little bit darker than it normally would. Then there's also just texture, and what this is going to do is going to be kind of like the solid mode that I had it on, but it's going to be showing the color. So it's going to be just your color. So if I go ahead and right click this image, this is the image that I'm technically coloring on. Right click, hit save. Go over here. Now we have this image. When I make this big, this is the image that you're going to be basing your color off of. So over here you can see it looks a little bit darker. That's just how it is in the 3D viewport. In the future I'll show you guys how to change lighting in your viewport. But right now just know if you want to reference what your actual color is going to be, look at your 2D image, and that's what it's would be if it was in a game. So from here we can go back to this default mode. And now for this airbrush, instead of painting on the same layer, I'm going to add another image, which like in Photoshop, another image is going to kind of be like another layer. And then later on I can composite those images as layers in Photoshop and flatten them into one file. So from here, adding a new layer or image on this clips tab, we can do add clip, go down new image. This is going to say where do I want to save this image. I want to save it on the desktop. And I'll just name this one mushroom_layer2. The first one came in as that diff color of 1, but just to make it easier, so I know that this one's this, I'll name it so it correlates to the 3D file. And the other thing is it's going to ask you this, so this is going to be what's the resolution of the texture file. The first one, since I just went to color on it, it just throws the default down and doesn't ask you because I didn't specify making a new image. So the default is a 2048 by 2048, so that's how many pixels across and tall it is. Then the format is a RGBA, so it's a RGB image with an alpha in it. So go ahead and hit OK. And you'll see that clip gets added over here. But technically, if I was to paint on this, it's still going to be painting on that first layer. So because it's not added to our material yet. So if we go to our shader tree, we have the mushroom, we have our diff color 1. I want this new image, which I named right here, mushroom layer 2. I want this to be above the other layer, so just like it would be in Photoshop, so on top of it. Go ahead and drag this up here. And recenter this. Now we have the layer here and the layer here. So I'll switch my color to something just for a test. So I want to make it green. So paint on this head real quick. Just do a quick scribble. Go over to this clips tab. And I can see over here it's kind of hard to see because of the color, so we'll switch it to something red and bigger. So if I color this red, over here you'll see the red showed up. So I know that it's painting on that layer. So now to switch between these layers, undo those real quick, what I can do is select those in here. Go ahead and turn our backdrop image back on. And change this opacity. Actually, we'll just put this opacity. Transparency is 0, just so color-wise I have something a little bit better. And might as well move this image over a little bit more so it's not in the way. So again, make sure that we're painting on our layer 2. So now I can go in here and I can get, if I want to color pick from our current image, what you have to do is have the layer that you want to color pick from selected, and then you middle click. So right here our color is currently at black, so middle click, and it changed to that brown color. And I can go back to this mushroom layer 2. Now with this color selected, I could go in and do this like darker color, so I could make it a little bit more red, make it a little bit darker. Now come in here, I'll actually turn symmetry on the X, so I don't have to paint this as much. I can go in and start putting this color under here really lightly, so I can either change the opacity down here. Right now my opacity is set to 100%, but I'm using a tablet, so if I do a softer stroke, it's going to display or paint on the object a little bit softer. And then I can come in here, turn it on to just texture mode. Now I can see just the color if I want. And I can just slowly make the bottom part of this mushroom a little bit darker. Just make sure that I'm painting on the right layer here, and all this will be collapsed, so it's not a big deal. So again with this, you just want to slowly layer on paint where you want it. So I'll make the bottom areas a little bit darker, and the top areas I'll probably go in and make a little bit lighter. So I can go to this color pick, get a little less transparent, a little bit lighter. Now I'll go up to like the top of his head. Increase a little bit more how light it is. There we go. Go ahead and turn wireframe off so I can only see the colors. I'm not really getting influenced by the wireframe here. And actually this line right here, I'll probably make this a little bit darker, and then this area a little bit lighter, just so it has this transition of light in here to dark in here, light, and then dark. Switch to our paintbrush, middle click to select this tool. Actually turn the wireframe back on so I can see this edge. Whoa, I don't want it that dark. So opacity, we'll just drop this down to 60%. Again, if you're using a mouse, when you click, it'll be 60% every stroke. So you have to drop that down to something as low as 1 or 2%. And then you can just really lightly layer this stuff on. So this is probably too light. So again, at any time you can go in, grab the eraser, tone it back a little bit. Or I could even go in here, grab the blur brush, and just paint on here, blur those two together. Or even grabbing the smudge brush and bring in one color in one way, another color in the other way. But again, the smudge brush and the blur brush, it's not going to blur all the layers together, just the current layer that you're working on. So lighten this up a little bit. And again, since this is digital, it's not like we're going to run out of paint, or it's not like you can't just go over another layer. So again, instead of going in and erasing this, I just grabbed a lighter color and now I'm going over it. And then I'll work in this lighter color on the edge right here as well. Again, anytime we can go back over to our reference and look. And just to remind you again, I do have symmetry on the X on, so anything I paint on one side is going to happen on the other side. Now I can go in on this arm. Paint that a little bit lighter. And again, usually with stuff like this, you can either kind of go all out and use a bigger brush, or if you're more comfortable with lower opacities and just slowly build up the volume, you can really do it either way. But again, this is also something you can just take your time with and kind of have fun and explore a little bit. So with here, I'm going to actually use this edge to kind of make a little almost line. I don't need to worry about staying perfectly on this line. Usually I don't want to go like straight line, and go with the edges, because you don't want to kind of call out your geometry. You want to go a little bit rounder or softer than that to give it the illusion of there being either more geometry there or just no sharp edges or anything. So again, this is going to be kind of like the little gills for this mushroom here. Another thing you can do is, I have symmetry on right now again, but you could get a lot of this done, so get it like 80–90% of the way done, and then turn symmetry off and do your final touches and kind of break symmetry a little bit to make it look not so uniform. But usually, just to get a feel for it, you can keep it on for quite a while, and technically you can just keep it on indefinitely and just have them perfectly symmetrical. But from here, now I'm just going to go and lower my brush size. Now I'm just going to paint these little striation things in here. Really don't need that many, you just need to be careful for the connecting, because right now I don't have them really coming to points all that good. Should more follow the lines that are here, at least a little bit more, and then I can do the ones in the middle afterwards. So I was kind of drifting on where the center point was. So now, just in case Moto crashes, I'm going to go ahead and save these images. So right click this guy, hit save. Right click this guy, hit save, so those are saved, and then over here do a file, save. Now everything's saved and I'm ready to go. Instead of doing these, I'll actually do 2 on this one's in between, probably 2 on this one as well. 2 on that one. And again, this would be another thing. Instead of using a Wacom tablet to take advantage of the Cintiqs, those make painting and sculpting significantly easier. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily easier because you're doing the same work, it's just probably it would be faster and your strokes would be more accurate. So now from here, let's take it a little bit more red, a little bit darker. Now real quick, I'll just go in, oh, probably not that dark. Drop this opacity down, something like 40. There we go. So now this going the whole light dark thing, and then I'm having it to where I do a light brush stroke here, harder brush stroke here, and a light brush stroke here. Gives it kind of that feeling of it being almost rounded out. And again, this is something that if you spend more time on it, it'll obviously look quite a bit better. But I'm just trying to get through this in a reasonable amount of time, show you guys a handful of techniques. So now looking at this from afar, it looks kind of round in there. Now we can go in and give them little red cheeks. That, make it a little brighter. Where are these guys at? Right here-ish. Let's make that a little bit lighter. Now opacity's down. Instead of doing multiple brush strokes, we'll just increase that. So we'll just put that on to position it. And I don't like where that's at. So undo. Move it down and over a little bit. Liking that a little better. Honestly not liking the color, but right now I'm just kind of working on position and size. Let's make them a little bit bigger. So we'll desaturate this. And get this white little halo effect going. Again, this, if you look at it, it's just kind of, they did a red dot and did a little bit of scribbles in there. So this is something that you can kind of just take the liberty and kind of design your own little scenario. But I'll work a little bit more color in there. Make it a little more orange and darker. Now I'll do a small line. Wow, not that dark. Test that out. There we go. Now just do light brush strokes. Kind of outline this a little bit better. Oops. Something like that. A bit of brighter color. Just make a little highlight on the top. Get a little bit darker color on the bottom. So something like that. You need to get the eyes in here. So normally you don't want to do 100% black. You're usually better off doing a really, really dark gray. Go in here and I'll just do a placement for the eyes. So do we like that? Actually, yeah, we like that. So now I can go in and to finalize these. From here I'm going to do a smaller brush, just so I get this harder edge in here. Again, brush-wise we're using a really soft brush. So if I use a smaller brush, the edge is going to read a little bit. better. And again, if I wanted to, I could have made a layer for the eye and the cheek, like the little facial things, a layer for the little mushroom gills underneath. Then from here, go ahead and just hit Shift A so it zooms. It's in here, and I'm going to switch to a whiter color. Look at what they did for the highlights, just two little guys. But the one thing with this, I'm going to turn symmetry off because right now the little guys would be in the upper left on this one, and it mirrors would be the upper right on that one. I want them to be uniform, or kind of the light being highlighted in the same part of the eye. Turn symmetry off. Put one right here, and move the other one right here. So we got something like this. So now, just for fun, I'm going to go in, middle click, grab this darker color, make it a little bit more dark. I'm going to do a little dark line right here, maybe not that dark. So again, I can either change the color, or I can change the opacity. One thing I definitely want to do is turn symmetry on real quick. Yeah, let's make this a little bit lighter. There we go. So I don't want this to be super noticeable. I just want to just give it the illusion that there's kind of like a little shadow in here when this curves down and kind of goes in. I'm actually make it a smidgen darker. So again, having a Cintiq here would be really nice, but the tablet works pretty good. Another thing, tablet settings wise, it's usually good to have forced proportions turned on in your Wacom settings, because in that manner, if you draw a circle, it'll actually be a circle and not an ellipse. There's definitely a difference if that setting's turned on or off. Turn my wireframe off and look at what we got here. See, I'm liking this quite a bit. Where it's at, I could still add more, or do like a directional lighting where like this it has a lighting coming from one direction, but usually a 3D thing you want to be a little bit more general than that. One thing I'm going to do is switch to this darker color, and I could actually hide the body if I wanted to. So instead of like lasso selecting the body, I can go to my UVs, select over here, hit hide because I know that those body pieces were separated out. Go to my paint tab, and now I have access to just his head here. So back to our paintbrush, do a quick test to make sure this is painting good, and it is. Change that curve a little bit. So what I did, if you hold the control key and change the brush size, what it is changing how soft or hard the brush is. So if you look over here, it's kind of soft, so if I drag all the way to the right, oops, all the way to the right, you see the curves change and it becomes a hard brush. And if you drag all the way to the left, it becomes more and more pointed. So I'm just going to darken this up. Just a little bit. And unhide. So now we got something like this. So again, this doesn't match this concept art perfectly. Go ahead and save our images out. Oops, I didn't change this one. I was only working on this one. So save him. File, save our 3D file. Now what I'm going to do is bring both of these images into Photoshop. So this diffuse color and this guy. So looking here, this is going to be closer to what our actual colors are. So this is, any of this paint in here was I was actually painting on the wrong layer in a sense. And this one, can go ahead and drag and drop. So if I zoom in here, there's some black stuff going on here. So I can jump back in to this file, look at his antennas and see if there's any weird stuff going on in there. It's looking like it's okay. So going back to our Photoshop file, these guys are on two separate layers, so I could save this one out. Actually, oops. Open him real quick, double click this. So with these two layers, turning this guy off, this I could just save out as, save as, and it'll save both of these layers together. And I could save it as PNG, JPEG, whatever, so I'll just name it as a PNG. So just name it Mushroom Diffuse, save that on the desktop, hit save, and then this combines both of those layers together. Go ahead and close Photoshop. Oh, it's still saving, so we gotta wait down here for this little bar. And it wants me to save the other one. Don't worry about that. So now the new image that I created, this PNG, would be these two layers combined. So we have this one that you can see there's the transparent areas, and this one's just the solid color, so those two combine. So going back into Modo, if you ever have any problems with these files, I personally normally use PNGs, so you can always right click here instead of doing save, do a save as, change this to the PNG, rename it whatever layer you want, and then you'd have PNGs. That's what I normally deal with instead of the targas, but if you're having any troubles with anything and it looks fine in here but it's wonky in Photoshop, feel free to save these guys as PNGs instead of targas. But going back, turning this back on default, so the shading's in there. This is going to be a little bit lighter than it would actually show up, but again, comparing this guy to that one, or even turning this back onto textured, you see we have, in a pretty quick fashion, have this guy painted up to match him pretty well. It's got some subtle color differences everywhere, so it's not just a solid fill color with little red cheeks and eyes. He's got a little bit more going on, so even when I zoom out, and again there's no shading going on here, you can see the differences of the different curves and shapes of his body, and it just reads a little bit better. So from here, again everything's saved out. I'll do a quick save as, change this as Mushroom Pose, because I'll pose him a little bit more. We'll do something like this little pose, so go to the right view, he's already leaning back. So now I'll have him kind of lean to the right a little bit. And I didn't do this before because with symmetry on, and if I would have tried to paint on one side or the other side, it would have screwed up because he wasn't symmetrical left and right. So now from here, go back to the Model tab, go to Form, do our Bend modifier. Just kind of give him a little bit of a tilt. Go to this side, kind of grab just this head. I'm actually going to change to the rotate tool. Just rotate it, and again if I right click it'll change where I'm rotating from. So down here I want it to rotate from the base of his neck, so about right there. Actually go from the top now. I get it right around the center of his head. Tilt it left a little bit. So now he's kind of got the textured, a little bit more of the little quizzical look going on as opposed to just being perfectly symmetrical. So now something like this is going to give the feeling of this character quite a bit better than him just being in a T-pose like this. He's got kind of a look going. But again, we'll call this guy good and finished. But again, with this painting stuff, you can put as much or as little detail into it as you want. You can go in and like add little pumice pore stuff for the mushrooms or whatever. But again, I just wanted to give you a few quick pointers on painting stuff and do a full asset all the way through so you guys could get the entire pipeline down.